What's up, guys? Travis Peters here with the Increased Life. I got a super special guest coming in hot today. This is my buddy Joseph Aaron, owner and founder, CEO, legendary company Multiply Inc., where he helps multiply missions that matter. I probably said that wrong. He's got a cool tagline, but we're going to let him say it. I just want to introduce you guys. He is, in my opinion, one of the most godly, God loving, God honoring entrepreneurs out there. He truly has a heart behind what he does. There's a mission to everything he does. He pushes movements. He helps people who have a mission. And a lot of you guys listening to this, I'm super excited to have him on because a lot of you guys listening to this feel called. You're like, I've got a mission. I'm called to something higher. I'm called to something bigger. And my buddy Joseph Aaron is the man to help you get there, the man to help you accomplish that big dream, that big thing God's put in your heart. And he loves those big, scary movements, the ones that are like, this feels too big for me to do on my own. He'll come alongside you, he'll lift you up, he'll give you the plan, the strategy, and coach you on how to get this mission and movement out into the world. Joseph, what's up, buddy?
What's up, Travis? Such an honor to be with you and all your peeps. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you were made to change the world. We got to get rid of these small dreams, Travis. We got to stop living in the idiosyncrasies of the moment, little struggles, little skirmishes that are happening. There's a big bad war to fight. We've got a world to win. What are we waiting on? Let's go.
And you guys can hear the preacher coming out, and like I believe Joseph's also called to preach. I mean, you'll get that as he just talks. It just flows through him, comes out of him. He's a man filled with the word. He's a man of power and authority. He walks with certainty and confidence. This is a guy you really want to lean into, guys. Please take notes on what he's about to say and let what he says sink into your heart, because we believe here at the Increased Life that God's about expansion, growth, increase, advancement, progress, movements, right? This is why we're such a good fit for you and I to hang out together today. And what I like about you is you go big, you think big. I mean, that I'm sure that's mainly what you'll be talking about today. You already kind of hinted at it, but going big for God and seeing yourself as a person who's worthy of doing big things for God. This is
I wouldn't even, so the word worthy, I'll struggle with that one a little bit. I think we all do. But I was talking to my daughter the other day. My daughter's a now 17-year-old entrepreneur, but she started when she was 10 and wrote her first book at 10 and went door to door and made 20,000 going door and then started speaking on stages, business stages with billionaires. Like there's 11-year-old Emily there, and then there's a billionaire standing right next to her speaking next. You know what I'm saying? And it was just kind of crazy. And so I was talking to her the other day and I said, she's talking about the next phase of her life and entrepreneurship versus college or both and all the things. And I said, Emily, you do realize that you have an unfair advantage, right? And she said, what? Like, cause we're in our family? And I'm like, no, not cause we're in our family. I mean, hopefully that's an advantage to you too, but no, I'm not talking about our family. You have an unfair advantage. She said, what? I said, Emily, most of the world is playing, like they're playing the game of life and they don't even know the rules. They don't know how it works. They don't know what the end zone is. Like, it's just all very arbitrary. I was like, you have the rule book.
Yeah.
That literally explains like what you're here for, what the purpose is, what winning looks like, and the principles of how to win. That's shockingly and surprisingly, even in the 21st century with all of our technology and blockchain and Facebook ads and all the things that entrepreneurs are talking about today, the same principles that worked on the farm are the same principles that apply to make you successful with all of this technology and tech and stuff. I'm like, once you read and understand the rules, it's an unfair advantage because everybody else is feeling around in the dark.
That's it.
You can just shine the light on the truth and just live it. And when you live it, it's like the word says, whatever you do will prosper.
Yes. Yes.
And it's not fair. Somebody just, if you're listening to this show right now, just nudge the person listening to you, scream out the window if you're driving down the road in your car and be like, it's not fair. because I
Yeah.
got the rules. It's not fair. And it ain't fair. And it's okay. I mean, it is fair because everybody has access, right? But like most people don't believe.
And why did he give you the rules? It's because he wants you to win.
Mm,
He wants you to use these things. He's like, you are my people. I'm giving you the unfair advantage for a reason, for a purpose,
hmm
right? And it talks about, he says things like, we speak in parables because not everyone's going to be able to understand it. He's withheld mysteries for us, not from us, but for us. Those are for us. And I think just a lot of us, a lot of people listening is like, I want to get that in you is God wants you to win. He's not against you. He's not here to make things hard or struggle. He's here to give you the advantage so that you win, prosper, and die. And I know you'll talk about the commands in Genesis
hmm
at some point today. That's your
Yeah.
jam.
Why?
And
Why? Why does he want us to win? Like, I mean, just ask yourself that question. Why? Why does God want us to win? And that really goes to a question of purpose, doesn't it?
mhm,
It's like, well, why are we here? Like, what's happening, right? And so, would you all agree that God, and this is a very common theological idea, okay, but applies to you, real life, right now, okay? I know we're getting a little highfalutin philosophy here for a second in theology, but just hear me out. Why does God want you to win, right? Philosophers and theologians have argued and talked about this topic for years, but one of the ideas is that God made the best world out of an infinite possibility of worlds.
go on.
All right. That's an interesting concept, right? Like God made the best world out of an infinite possibility of worlds because the argument flow could go something like God's good. And he said that what he created was good. And then he made man, of course, and it's very good. Right. And it's like God didn't make a bad world. He made a very good world. Right.
Mhm.
And so some of the argument will take you even further, but you don't even have to believe, Travis, that he made the best of all possible worlds. If you believe that he made a good world and he made it very good for us, then you have to look at the world that he created and what he speaks of to the people who he put in charge of the world he created. Like, what is the first thing that God says? Oh, I'm going to talk about Genesis, just like you said. What is the first thing God says? And can I just tell my story real quick? Just like in 60 seconds or less, I want to tell you guys what
Yeah,
happened.
let's do it. It's an amazing story.
Guys, I wanted to change the world, so I started a non-for-profit student movement all by ourselves. Startup, no funding, no capital, no church backing, no denominational backing, nothing. My wife, me, went into the poorest area of North America that we could find, the brokest, most dysfunctional area of North America that we could find. And we went into right near East St. Louis. Okay, East St. Louis is considered on the same level of poverty as Africa in many parts. I know, sounds crazy. It is. Okay. And so we were there and we wanted to change the world. And we said, if we can create a movement here that changes the lives of students and multiply it, we can start a movement anywhere. And so we started there. And we had great success. As a matter of fact, within a few months of launching, Travis, one of the parents came up to us and they said, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? Who are we?" They're like, "Who are you?" They're like, "You're only been here like what 30 or 60 days. We don't even know who you were a few months ago." They said, "Now there's more students that are a part of what you're doing here than there are in all of the youth groups put together in the city by far." They're like, "We're watching you." Like they were very afraid because they had never seen growth at this rate. But the problem is when you grow at that rate, what happens? You need more money to sustain the growth. It was a student movement. It was just my wife and I's income that was funding it, right? And then later there were miracles that happened and stuff like that. But needless to say, as the growth happened, we ran out of money. And we ran out of money multiple times and we went homeless, legit homeless 3 times. Not homeless, I'm living with my parents. Homeless, how do I pay $55 for this hotel for my family of 5 tonight? Or we sleep on the street.
How old were you?
Well, there's a couple different times, but 33, 35, and 30, I think. A couple different times. It went in waves, right? So I was in my 30s with 3 kids.
Okay, but that's important because at age 30, 35, 37, those ranges, when you basically you went for something big,
Mhm.
it did not work out like you would hoped, and you ended up homeless. A
Mhm.
lot of people, a couple things are at play, and I think it's important to just point out for those listening is one, he didn't quit. When man, that would have been easy to quit.
Mhm.
Two, he had a family. He was still taking risks. He was still doing what he felt like he was called to do. And three, a lot of people who are like, man, you were 37 and went home, like you didn't have it all figured out by then. Like that's what I think of sometimes. I'm like, because I'm 37 and I'm
Mhm.
like, man, we always fight this thought. I teach on this about how shouldn't I be further along in life by now? I'm 37. I thought I'd have it figured out. I thought I'd be rock and roll. I thought I'd be a multi mega millionaire by now.
Mhm.
Right. But it's like, no, hold on. Look at timelines. Timelines don't matter in the kingdom, for one. As far as like how old you are, all that matters is obedience. And so you're being obedient at these different phases. I just love the story of like you're still figuring it out. You're still going after it. You still had a family. You weren't playing it safe. You were going for the mission. You were going for the movement, and you were going big, no matter what was happening. Keep going. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and I think the message that I want to share is isn't so much I would like you to experience the failure through my failure. Don't do what I did, right? Like
Sure.
don't do what I did because I did give up, Travis. Like ultimately broke, busted, disgusted, frustrated, and angry with God, and not sure how I was going to solve the problem and why God left me alone and why He wasn't telling me what to do, why He didn't just drop money from the sky if we wanted me to change the world. Like I didn't understand. I became so angry, frustrated, and honestly bitter against God that in at the end of let's see 2015 I gave up. I was exhausted spiritually, mentally, emotionally. We were homeless again. We had been homeless for months and I was done. And so I moved to Florida and started trying to figure out like God, not and like why would God let money be such a big issue? Do you know that money stops the lack of money? I'm using air quotes for those listening on audio. The lack of money destroys millions of movements and millions of dreams and millions of ministries. And it's easy to close your eyes to that and just be like, are you about to take up an offering? No, I'm not about to take up an offering. But the reality is, like, if you're willing to actually look at the way the world actually works, not the way you wish it worked, but the way it actually worked, you would realize that money is a fundamental component that is a part of the mission that ministries you believe in are trying to achieve. There is a reason why the church takes up a collection every Sunday. There is a business plan associated with the church, and it was set up by God. And it's like this fear of money, this lack of understanding about money, this lack of money destroys movements. And let me tell you something else, it aborts more movement than any abortion clinic you can count. Oh, I said it. For many of you, money is aborting your dreams. You won't even go that direction because you don't, quote, have the money. And that's what happened to me. And I started realizing this truth, Travis. It's an ugly truth. It's a truth that we don't want to face, right? Because it's like, is it me? Is it my lack of production that's causing the problem? Like what? Or does God really not? Because how? Come on, man. How can God? This was my question. How could God, the infinite God, the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills? Come on, you know what I'm talking about? We're all like, oh, he's got a mansion for me in glory. And it's like, well, if he's got all this money, which by the way isn't even real, money isn't even real, but nevertheless, if he's got all this money, like, why doesn't he just give me some so I can do what he actually wants done? Think about that. Why, why doesn't God give your church more money? Whoa, we went personal. Why doesn't God give you more money? Why doesn't God just drop it from this? Why would you work 40 hours a week, 50 weeks out of the year for money and then act like it's not important?
Good.
Act like it's not valuable to me. I'm too holy for that. And it's like, really? Because you spend more time with working for your money than you do working with your kids. You spend more time working for your money than you do going to church and praying.
That's good. Listen
So
up,
I'm like,
people.
okay, so reality struck me, right? Because all of a sudden, here's a movement that I believe God gave me, God spoke to me about, God called me to, and it didn't happen. And the only way that I could assess why it didn't happen, Travis, is we ran out of money. Somebody said, well, you didn't pray hard enough. I wish I could smack you right now. I love you, but the Bible says smite the fool. Right? And so what I did when I left, here's the story. When I went to Florida, I was angry at God, and I said, I had to ask the question, what if God doesn't care about the world? What if he's like Benjamin Franklin and many of the forefathers thought, and he's a deistic God, not a theistic God. He set the world in motion and then walked away. And is no longer, which is a silly thing for me to believe because I have seen miracles and I've seen like truly miraculous healings. And he did lots of miracles along the way as we led the movement, and yet it still failed. And I'm like, this doesn't line up with who I think God is. But yet, when I started looking around, I'm sorry, I'm going deep into the pain here, Travis, but when I started looking around, so many meaningful things that people were trying to do were failing from a lack of money. So many meaningful things that people wanted to do weren't happening because of a lack of money. And I said, okay, I need to ask the question, what if God doesn't care? Because he just abandoned several hundred teenagers to complete this function because our movement wasn't there anymore to serve them. And I knew they would not be a part of any of the movements that were already there because whatever. I just knew. Okay. And so I had to decide, if God doesn't care, do I care? Is this okay, Travis?
For it. Keep going. I
Okay.
want to hear your rawness. I want to hear what you
Yeah.
went through, and then because it's going to make it makes the other side of the story that much better.
If God doesn't care, do I care? Like, could he really care? If it was just money and he can drop it from the sky and he's got so much, why wouldn't he just drop a million on me? Like, a million would have made a big, that's nothing. Right?
Mhm.
But he didn't. So I'm like, if he doesn't care, do I care? And I came to the decision that even if God was cruel, I know this is like, some of you may not be able to handle this, but it's God is not cruel. Okay. But this is the exercise that I went through in my bitterness and struggle and frustration and rage at a failed movement, at a failed attempt to do what God called me to do. And I said, if God is cruel, and this is just a big trick, and he doesn't really care, because he clearly doesn't care. He didn't give me the money. He's got the money. Why wouldn't he give me the money? Therefore, do I care? And I said, you know what? I care. And even if God doesn't care, I want to do things that help alleviate suffering in people's lives. And then I said, okay, I've made my decision. I am going to operate in such a way that I help people. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to need some money. Right? Because I'd already tried it without money, homeless 3 times. And I'm like, so I'm going to figure out the money thing. And
Yeah.
hopefully along the way, I'll figure out some things like with God to see why he might have done it the way that he did it. And then maybe I'll get it all figured out. And so I, like, full disclosure, I was angry at God. My wife made me go to church twice a month, but some months it was less than once a month that I would go, and we would fight about it. But she kept making me go to church because we wanted to be a good example to our kids. And so for several years, I struggled through the money issue to figure out, how do I make money? And why is money important? And how does money equate to everything else? So here's the end of the story. I finally hit our first $1 million year, and we moved into a mansion, which I had been telling my kids we were going to do. Yes, I am overcompensating for the fact that I was homeless 3 times. I don't need a
His house,
mansion, but I
his
like
house is crazy, y'all. It is phenomenal.
because I wanted to show my kids what was possible if you went after it, right? So I then, this is the story of my first mansion, by the way. We live in a different mansion now. But and that's the end of the mansions. I don't want to buy any more mansions. I've proven the point to the children. Anyways, so I'm sitting in this ornate master bathroom, Travis, and I had an event coming up the next week, and there were a bunch of people coming who wanted to know how I had figured it out. And I was sitting there, like, leaning against the sink, and I started crying. because like, we were blessed. And I'm like, God, you always took care of me. Like, even though I was homeless, there was never a night that I was on the street. And even though we didn't have any food, we would get the free breakfast with the hotel and gather as much as possible so we had enough for lunch. And usually we had money for dinner by the end of the day, going out hustling, selling something, right? Felt like a crack addict the way that we had to like hustle. Literally, it's like, how do I get like $70 for today so that I got food and the $55 for it's insane. Anyways, I'm sitting there in the having achieved the result. And I'm like, God, you took care of me. Why didn't you take care of those kids? Why'd you let me fail them? I got angry, I was very emotional. I'm like, I did everything you told me to do. Now, some of you believe God speaks to people and some of you don't, but this was a moment that God spoke to me. I'm just going to tell you right now, God spoke to me in this moment. I was like, I did everything. And I'm telling you, a voice came back. And this is what it said. You didn't even do the first sentence. And I went, what? I was like, whoa, because God hadn't spoken to me in years, like that real strong presence of God, just boom, right? Because I was so like, I was working my way through my bitterness and rage at him for failing me, because he failed me in my mind, right? There was no other way. It's like, well,
there's air quotes when you said that.
Yeah, air quotes, right? He failed me in my mind. And it's like, he could have wrote it in the sky, just tell me what to do. And he's like, you didn't even do the first sentence I told you to do. In my mind, like I've memorized, I know people say this, I have legit memorized hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I was a Bible quizzer back in the day and studied ancient Greek for the new. So I'm like, I love, like, I read commentaries for fun, right? It's like, my mind is racing to say, wait a second, what is the first thing that God ever, like, what's he mean? And I had been listening to these different leaders, like trying to figure out Genesis and stuff like that. And so I went back to Genesis and I looked at the first verse that God ever spoke to us, to mankind. And I remembered when my daughter was born, that when I held her in my arms for the first time, Travis, I was like, I didn't speak for a little bit. Because whatever I said first, I wanted to really matter. I wanted to remember. It was a moment that was special, was set apart. It's holy. And I realized, man, whatever God said first, I should pay attention. The first thing God says to mankind is, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. That verse came back to me. And I was like, I ran and grabbed my Bible. And I'm like, looking, I'm like, be fruitful. I've already had kids. Right?
It's like where most people go.
Yeah. I'm like, this is about sex. Like, have no fear, God. I'm a fan.
We're good there.
Yeah. And so another topic, we're talking about money and sex. It's not allowed in Christian. And I'm like,
the increased life right there. That's multiplying.
Yeah. So I'm like, and then I started looking and you start studying this out. Anybody ever thought about this verse beyond the obvious? It must be about more than sex and procreation, right? Because throughout the rest of the Bible, when they talk about the blessings of God and about honor from God and about the way God judges us, it will often use the word fruitful, which is an allusion back to the very first words out of God's mouth to us. Some of you are looking for God's purpose in your life, and he already told you.
Oh, I fully agree.
He told all of us already. And the lie out there is like, you got to go look for it. And you got to wait for a voice from heaven to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I was waiting for a voice from heaven as I led a movement that was growing to tell me what to do. And I was mad at God for not telling me what to do and for all the failures that ensued because I didn't know what to do because, quote, he didn't tell me what to do. But actually, he did tell me what to do. It was the first thing he told me to do. It was the first thing he told everyone to do. The problem was I didn't do it.
But
I was so busy in Acts and in the Gospels and in the epistles that I forgot the beginning, the very first thing, the 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 framework. In marketing we talk about pre-frames, and pre-frames is how people enter the conversation, right? It's like you can structure the conversation, Travis, in such a way so that when people enter it, they always enter through this belief and mindset. The first pre-frame that God sets up so that everything else in the word can be understood is be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Am I talking real good, Travis? Is this
you're
making sense to
you're,
anybody?
you're crushing it. In the message version,
Mm-hmm.
the commands that he gives, the first thing he says, God bless them,
Mm-hmm.
and then he said, prosper, reproduce, fill the earth, and take charge.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like that translation also. I think that's just a great way to, man, I don't want to preach your message, but you've got it. You've got the authority. You go do it. You go prosper. You go take charge. You go multiply. You go reproduce. You go subdue it. Dominate. Some of the translations say.
Yes, dominate. That's a very accurate translation. So let's just go. I call this now God's 4-step plan to change the world. And everyone listening to this is called to this.
Yes.
Period. That is not even theologically questionable. This is the command to all mankind. That is the context of this verse. Period. No question. All right. So be fruitful. What does that mean? Well, or what was the one you said? Produce? Yeah, that's a good word. We use the word. By the way, produce. What do we call it when you go to the aisle in the grocery store that has fruit in it? The produce aisle, right? That's where the word comes from. The idea of production literally comes from this verse, right? It flows out of this. This doesn't flow out of that. That flows out of this. Okay? And so when you hear be fruitful, what does that mean? Well, imagine you were a tree and God told you to produce. What would you do? Well, you would like it's the thing of value that comes out of your efforts. I'm going to say that again. It's the thing of value that comes out of your own efforts. Now, here's the interesting thing about like when God says to humanity, be fruitful, he's commanding you to, from your own efforts, produce something. So my first question to you is, what are you producing? My second question would be like, is what you're producing valuable? Well, how do you know if it's valuable? It's actually a very simple answer. It took me a long time to figure it out. The way you know if something is valuable is if other people are willing to trade their production for your production.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? Like an apple. If you produce apples in your apple tree, think about it. How do you know that apples are valuable? Because people, like a guy who produces oranges might want something besides orange juice. He may want some apple pies. And so he'd be willing, Travis, if you made apples and I made oranges, I'd be like, I'll give you 3 oranges if you give me 3 apples. Well, that took effort for me to produce those oranges. So the fact that I'm willing to give them to you in trade for something else shows that what you're producing is valuable too.
Good time, effort, and energy for you to
Yeah.
produce those things.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, okay, it's valuable. Watch this. Watch this. Many times, especially in the entrepreneur world and in the non-entrepreneur world, many times people ask the question and they get stuck here. They say, what should I produce?
Mm-hmm.
And they ask God, and they wait on God, and they squeeze their hands really tight when they pray, and they squeeze their eyes shut really hard until tears come out. Because they're like, I gotta know what I'm supposed to produce. And God answered that question too. I'm going to say that again. God answered that question too.
Good.
Because before he tells us to produce, before he tells us to do something, you know what he tells us before he tells us to do something? Get ready, here it is. He tells us who we are. Let's say it again. God told you who you are before he told you what to do. Because before we ever get to be fruitful and multiply, the first thing that God tells us about us, God said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. So in the image of God made he him. What does that mean? This goes back to, if any of you are watching movies, imago Dei, the theological concept in Latin, which literally means you're made in the image of God. What does that mean? There's a lot of theological discussion about what that means, but there's one thing that's clear that it's mean. We were made to be like him. That's why we try and exemplify and live a life of holiness, because we are trying to mirror the image of God. Why? Because when we try to be like him, we honor him by trying to be who he told us to be. There's some challenges in the world by people who literally rebel against being who God called them to be. Another subject. Okay? But being who God called you to be that's the thing. And so it's like, what do we know about God in Genesis? When he says, let us make man in our image, Travis, what is the one thing we know about God in Genesis chapter 1? That God is a capital C creator. He's the creator. And so if that's what we know about God in Genesis chapter 1, and the first thing he tells us about us is that we're made to be like him, that tells me that we were made to create. Yes. And whether you realize it or not, you're a creator. Whether you feel creative or not, you're a creator. Whether you recognize it or not, throughout your life, you create. And so the question is, what, Travis, does God create? What does he create? Well, everything. And there's a lot of ways you can answer this question, but one of the ways I like to answer this question, what does God create, is God creates worlds. Worlds. And whether you realize it or not, you create worlds. You live in a world of your own creation. Some of you don't believe me right now. You're like, no, I don't. I just live in the real world. No, you live in the world that you believe that it is. You create your world with your beliefs about what it is. How many of you know people who live in a prison of their unbelief? Mm-hmm. You create worlds. Well, okay, that's a little side note. That's who you are. We'll get back to that. Here's the big idea, though. You were made to produce, and you're made to be like God. So the question becomes, what did God produce? Like, what kind of world did God produce? And the answer is very simple. I know, silly answer. What kind of world did God produce? Answer: the one he wanted to. He certainly didn't make a world he didn't want to. Because he didn't have to make a world, right? He just got to make a world because he gets to, because he's all powerful and the creator. So he makes the world he wants to. Therefore, following the train of simple logistical thinking, it's like, well, if God is a creator and makes the worlds he wants to, as long as we're living in alignment with being him, we should and are called to produce the world we want to. I think, Travis, you told me you've said this before to them, but ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I come across so many well-meaning, passionate, God-fearing, Christian, kingdom-loving people who want to change the world, who are squeezing their hands and begging God to give them the answer for exactly what they're supposed to do, and to let me know line by line, precept upon precept, little detail after little detail. I mean, if God told you what to do, you'd still ask him what sort of soda to deliver that you should order for the meeting that you're going to have to talk to people about the world you're trying to create, because you want every detail. But that's not how God set it up. He made you in his image, and he's a decision maker. He's a creator. He decides the kind of world he wants, and then he makes the world he wants. Yes. You, if you're going to be like him, must start making decisions, because you're waiting on God but God's waiting on you.
There is, oh man. Well, even in the Message translation where it talked about, um, you take charge, you
Yeah.
subdue, you have dominion. And I think this is where a lot of people, there's going to be people listening to this. I think most of them are instantly like, dude, let's go. I love this message. But there's some who are listening who are like, okay, I'm open, but it's grinding against everything I learned growing up.
Yep.
In the book of Job, I believe it's 22:28. There's something pretty interesting here that I want to bring up because it plays right in. And it says this. It says, you shall decide and decree a thing, and it will be done for you. And God's light will shine among your ways.
Wow.
You decide. You take charge. You subdue. You have dominion. You decide and decree. And we talk a lot about how God wants us to reign as a king and a queen on this earth. Mm-hmm. We have the power and authority. God gave it to us. We've been delegated this authority here on earth. Now you decide. You decree a thing, and it'll be established for you. And God's light will shine upon your ways. Man, I love this message that you're saying, because I want, as part of my movement, is I want more Christians to take their place as royal authority on this earth, to make decisions, to take charge, to prosper, reproduce, multiply, replenish, all the things that you're teaching and preaching and saying right now. But it's an identity shift. What you're saying right now is we got to see ourselves the different way. We got to upgrade our identity, upgrade our inner image in order for us to do this.
You guys just need to just tap yourself on the chest and say, I am a creator.
Yeah.
I am a creator, right? And you're like, I'm not a creator. I work a job. Okay, watch this. You have chosen to produce by partnering with someone who is producing. That's all that is. When you decide to work with someone else, you've decided to join forces for a set rate. You're still a producer. So what does your company produce? Like if you work at McDonald's, you've partnered with a company who produces hamburgers and fries. Although some would argue with McDonald's that it's evil. There's nothing evil about that, right? It is simply like, we know that it's valuable. Does it make the world better that there are restaurants in the world who will produce the food so that you don't have to produce the food yourself? Yes. See, that makes the world better. It's valuable. We know, because people are willing to trade for that result. They're willing to trade. Okay, so that's be fruitful. So you may be an attorney. Well, you've decided that if you're a patent attorney, I got a client who's a patent attorney. It's like, he's a patent attorney. What he does is he helps protect people's creations, right? So that other people can't sell their creations that they made, and it can be legally protected. Is that valuable? Absolutely. People pay him a lot of money to do that, right? And it's like, okay, cool. That's valuable. Okay, so that's be fruitful. That's only step one, though, because here's what happens. So for those of you who are at step one, your struggle is making a decision what to produce and actually producing something valuable in the world. You know it's valuable when the world's willing to trade you for it. When I traded Travis oranges for apples, that was just trade. Everybody cool with that? Is that okay? Would everyone be okay if I had an orange tree and he had apple trees and I wanted some apples and he wanted some oranges, for me to give him some oranges and for me to give him him to give me some apples? Is that cool? It's like, that's just trade. But as soon as I say money, it's like, ooh, careful. You don't want too much of that, right? Wait a second. Does God want me to produce a little or a lot? Fruitfulness, the idea of fruitfulness even includes the idea of like bountiful, right? Does God want me to produce a little or a lot? Watch this. What happens, Travis, when you produce a lot of fruit? What happens if you just let it sit around? It rots. Because it's not, I've never said it this way before. It's not actually the fruit that's valuable. There's an expiration date on the production, right? It's how another person in the world benefits from your production that makes it valuable.
Good.
See, because God, this is this whole idea. God made the best of all possible worlds. Like, if he would have made a world where there was no trade, and where trade was not encouraged, I could only experience the goodness of my own production. If I made orange trees, I could not have apple pie. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
If I made orange trees, watch it, if I made oranges, unless I cut down some orange trees, which I don't think would make very good wood, I wouldn't be able to have a house. Because I don't just need oranges, I need a house. And there's probably some other, like clothing would be nice, right? And some other things would be nice. And it's like, well, if I could only benefit from the things that I produce, the world would be a terrible place. Could you imagine, Travis, if you could only enjoy the benefits? God is so infinitely intelligent beyond anything we can think or imagine. Like he thought of this. He's like, no. If we want a good world, and I've got a bunch of creators in the world, I want them producing a lot of stuff, but I don't want them to only be able to have access to the things that they produce. I want all of them to produce different things so that they can trade. And then they can all have the benefits of all the things that they're creating, which exponentially and continually makes the world better and better and better and better and better. Could you imagine if I only had my own product? Could you think about it? I have a microphone in front of me. I would have to figure out how to make a microphone in order to have a microphone. A pen. Travis, I could not make a pen. Think about all that would be required for me to produce a pen.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
First of all, it's plastic. Okay. So I'm going to need some oil. Well, I don't have any oil. So I'm going to go have to drill for some oil. Well, I don't have a drill. Right? So now I'm going to have to go get some metal. Well, I don't have any metal. Are you all following what I'm saying here? I don't have any metal and I don't have any workers. Like I'm going to have to make this thing myself. So now I'm going to go need to get some fire and get some metal somewhere, find me some metal to make an oil drill, which I don't know how to do. So I'm going to have to go through, how many split tests did it take before they made the first successful oil drill? I don't know, but I have to do that myself in order to get some oil. And then I need to figure out, once I have some oil, does anyone have any oil, like personally in your home? Could you right now go make some plastic? It's like, probably not. Okay. What else do I need? I don't know. I need some stuff and then I need the ink. Well, where do I go to get the ink? Like, what do I need to make red? And how do I mix it? And there's probably some sort of machine. Now I need to be able to build that machine. But in order to run the machine, I need electricity. Why? How am I going to get? Are you guys seeing what I'm saying? It would be an insane world that didn't have trade. And so God's 4-step plan to change the world starts with every person should be producing something of value in the world. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't stop there, because that's the challenge for so many people, especially like under 100,000 a year. It's like most of them are trying to figure out, like, what do I produce that's valuable and trade it in the world. But God did not stop at, hey, work real hard from your own efforts all the time to produce lots of stuff. That's not the message. That's step 1. Step 2 is multiply it. So step 1 is worried about how much fruit am I producing? But when you move to step 2, you stop worrying about fruit production and you start worrying about tree production. How do I make more trees that make more fruit? See, this is why so many people don't get to the next level, because they're so focused on doing everything from their own efforts and they won't release control, that they never move from fruitfulness to multiplication. And I don't care how hard you work, you are limited by the number of hours per day and the amount of calorie intake you have and the energy that you're able to output in order to produce. There is a limit on how much you can personally produce. But God calls us not just to be fruitful, but to multiply.
But can I ask you something?
Yeah.
You touched on it, but let's see if we can extract a more concise answer. What about the people who are listening to it, who are still, like I said, you touched on this, but who are still saying, yeah, but I don't know what to actually go do. I have this business idea. I have that business idea. I want to do this, but I don't have a college degree, but I don't have XYZ. Yeah. I want to produce something, but I don't know what. Can you give them just like here's one next step so I can mentally get you past this, so I can get you on to steps 2, 3, 4?
With a very fast story, I went through this issue when I was trying to lead the movement. I was trying to figure out how to make more money to supply the movement with more money to be able to do more things. And what I would do is I would see one thing, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I see opportunity everywhere. And I'd be like, "Ooh, this could be really cool." And I'd go down the road of that, and I'd hit an obstacle, and I'd be like, let me see if I can figure this out." And I'd start trying to figure out the obstacle, and I'd see another opportunity that didn't deal with that obstacle, and so then I'd chase that opportunity. And I do that until I hit the obstacle, right? And then when I hit the obstacle, I try and find a solution. I find another thing, grass is greener on the other side. And so what was happening is I was in a cycle, get ready for this, a cycle of indecision,
Mm.
which really should be like not decision, because I kept not making a decision.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so when I look back after we got to the place where whatever, I don't feel like, I mean, I'm a success. I am fruitful. I am multiplying. I am filling the earth. But I'm just starting. Like I'm not even. I don't see myself in that viewpoint. Anyways, point is when we started having success, and I'll define success as say 20K months. Right, we're going from like 1K months. Right. Um, um, what happened was, and this is, I had an amazing wife. And she sat me down one day after being homeless multiple times. We moved to Florida, and she had never complained. She sat me down one day, and I was like, "I think I should do this, and I could kind of do this." And I was like, thinking through. Anybody thinking through your ideas? Well, I'm just trying to quote unquote figure it out, right? And she sat me down. I'll never forget it. And I was like sitting in a chair. She kneeled down in front of me. And for those of you who can't see, I'm squishing my cheeks together with one hand on either side of the cheek. She's squishing my cheeks together so that my lips puckered out. And she said, "Baby." And I said, "Uh-huh." She said, "I can't go homeless again." Because there was no movement anymore. The movement was the five of us in our family. How are we going to figure that out, right? Let's work on fruitfulness before we start working on filling the earth. Ooh, there's a little sneak peek. Some of you are trying to fill the earth before you're fruitful, and it won't work because there's a sequence to it. Anyways, so she's like, "I can't go homeless again," and I said, "Uh-huh." I'm listening real close because like I really love her and I didn't want to lose her, and it sounded like an ultimatum. I don't. It was.
Leverage
She's
there.
better than that. She was letting me know, like, this is the standard I need you to hit. And so I said, "Okay." And she said, "Look," she's like, "I just need you to choose." That's what she said. "I need you to choose. There's so many things you could do. I know. But I believe that if you will just commit to one thing for 6 months, our life will change. The problem is you're bouncing around all the time and you're failing to decide. So here's what's going to happen, babe." Uh-huh. For those of you listening, I'm like squeezing my cheeks together. As she said, "You're going to pick one thing and you have till the end of today. And at the end of the day, you're just going to say, 'Hey, babe, this is who I'm going to help. And this is the end result I'm going to help them get. And we're going to work on that for 6 months and we're not changing.' At the end of 6 months, you can change your mind if you want to. But first, we're going to do 6 months and we're not going to change our mind. Is that cool?" I said, "Yep, that's cool." She said, "That's what we're going to do." So I made that decision, and within 30 days, we were at 20K months, like 15 to 20K months, because I just made the decision. See, the
Our
problem
decision.
is the only problem at the Be Fruitful stage is you haven't decided.
Yes.
You haven't decided who you're going to serve. Because as soon as you decide who you're going to serve and an end result that you can help them achieve, like you, you're going to put it to the world, and the world is going to say, "I want you to help me achieve this result," or "I don't want you to help me achieve this result. I like the drill bit that you've created," or "I don't like the drill bit that you've created," right? But as soon as that happens, you're going to, if you decide to create drills, I'm just using a dumb example, right? It's like, cool. Then you're going to make another drill bit, or you're going to go research that audience and say, "What's the biggest problem you're facing when you're trying to put holes in walls?" And then you're going to go try and solve that problem using your creative power. Oh, you're a creator, right? And so for me, I started helping real estate agents like get more leads and stuff like that. That was it. It was that simple. That's how it started. I don't do that at all anymore, right? But I did do that for several years, and it gave me the skills to be able to grow into higher level things. But so to answer your question, like for the person dancing around and stuff like that, here's the problem. You haven't decided what to create yet. How long does it take to make a decision? Do you know how long it took me to make that decision, Travis? You know how long I spent in the cycle of indecision? 7 years. You don't even realize it's happening. You're just in a cycle of indecision, and you keep not making the decision for fear that you're going to miss out on a better decision, right? Yeah, maybe I could have been the guy that created crypto. I don't know. Maybe I could have been the guy that created like Tesla. I don't know, right? But I made a decision about what to create. And even though it wasn't $1 billion decision, it was still a multi-million-dollar decision. And I believe almost anything that actually helps people could pretty easily be a multi-million-dollar a year business. Like that's not like you could create apples for millions of dollars per year. Like, I mean, it's just like,
Yes.
and you know what I'm saying? And so it's decisions. Did that answer the question, you think, Travis? Or
Yeah, really, it's just a lot of us deal with that fear of picking the wrong thing.
Mm,
But the enemy's biggest deception is like that keeps you going around the mountain.
yeah.
If you picked anything, you'd be better off than where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to remember this little thought process helped me personally a couple years ago was the thing I'm about to pick doesn't have to be for life.
Yes.
Just like you said. It might be for 6 months, a year, 2 years. It might be for a month. But I need to pick something. I need to be a car in motion so we can steer it. So God's got something to steer here. So pick something. Let's get after it. Choose something. The fear of indecision is keeping you broke. The fear of indecision is keeping you flatlined, stagnant, plateaued, keeping you stuck where you're at. Make a choice, make a decision, go all in on it, and then let's see where God steers it from there. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? As I've experienced, God may not steer anything. You may just start succeeding or struggling or whatever happens. And it's like, God is capable of stepping in whenever he wants to. And as long as you're obeying the general principles of the will of God, stop trying to over spiritualize your failure.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I love you. That's why I'm saying that, because I did it. Stop trying to over spirit. I use God as my crutch for why I was failing. Well, God didn't send me any money. I guess he didn't want it. And it's like, no. It's like
I hear this a lot. I get it. Keep going.
oh man, when I originally moved to Florida and I was so angry at God, in my mind, I didn't write it, but I wrote this whole book in my mind. And I called the book The Emissary. This is embarrassing to share. I hope you all don't judge me for this. I wrote a book in my mind called The Emissary, and it was going to be a tragedy. And the emissary was going to tell the story of a king who had a great kingdom, who was expanding his kingdom, and he employed and empowered leaders to go into faraway lands and to like announce that the kingdom was coming, right? And I was going to use a king. It's an obvious allusion to the scripture. And in the story, I was going to have this guy who was so excited, and he got the seal of the king and the power of the king. He got sent into the faraway land, and he tells the faraway land, and the faraway land is so excited and just can't wait for the soon coming power of this glorious king who's doing all these great things. And the king never comes. And month after month and year after year happen until the emissary is left destitute and homeless and struggling, and the king doesn't show, and the people of the kingdom mock him, and the story ends. Because that was my view of God then. That's what he did to me. And when I came full circle and God taught me what I'm teaching you all, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, I realized that so many of us go out to the world to move the kingdom forward with the expectation that God is going to come in and do all this stuff, right? And maybe he will. I'm not saying he won't. But while I was trusting God, God was trusting me. And I was mad at God that he didn't come do the miracles. And I'm not going to put this on God, but I think I could say God was probably mad at me that I wasn't working, that I wasn't producing, that I wasn't multiplying, that I wasn't doing the simple principle that must be followed for success in the world. that he told me in the very first sentence he spoke. And the first thing is, find something to produce that's valuable. Because you can trade that for some other gifts, skills, services you need to further the kingdom, to change the world, to make the world better. I'll get to that in a second, right? And so like, you're trusting God, but God's trusting you.
Let that sink in, guys.
So let's go to multiply now, if that's okay. So multiply. The next step in the process is, many people, they're like, because financially they had this mindset that you and I talk about, Travis, we're like, okay, I have enough money for me. Like, you can have enough money for you from your own production, period. No question about it. Like, if I work hard every day, I'm going to make enough money to make my family survive. Unless you're in like third world country and all kinds of whatever, right? Well, he does, but God doesn't stop at be fruitful. He says multiply. What does that mean? It's like, whatever you're producing, find a way so that it can continue to be produced at a higher volume without your efforts. I'm a tree that produces apples. How do I produce more trees that will produce more apples? And the interesting thing is how nature teaches us this works. Because in order to multiply, we're going to talk real good here. In order to multiply, you must take of that which you've already produced and reinvest the fruit as seed.
Yes.
You must risk your production and put it in the ground. Okay? You see, this is why it's all based on God. This is why money isn't real. This is why the whole thing, these are spiritual laws, because you must risk of your hard-earned, effort-gained value, fruit, orange, apple, put it in the ground. Now, if someone didn't tell you to put the fruit in the ground, it would be the dumbest thing in the world. It's like, so how do I grow this thing? It's like, oh, you take the fruit and you put it in you cover it with dirt. What? Yeah, you put it there. Will it grow? Probably. Some do, some don't.
Well, and we won't know instantly.
Yeah, and we don't know right away, right? But this is how I want you to multiply. I want you to reinvest of that which you received into the ground so that you can grow more trees. So that you can produce a multiple. One tree produces, let's say one tree produces 100 apples a year. I have no idea, right? Well, 2 trees then produces 200 apples. And the funny thing is, like, you only have to put one apple in the ground. As a matter of fact, one apple has lots of seeds, but we'll just use a whole apple as an example for now. You only have to put one apple in the ground, in theory, if they grew at 100% rate, to grow one more tree. 1/100th of an investment can produce a double return. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what you call something that gives you a 2x return with a 1/100th of investment in the investment world right now? A scam. That's what people would call it. That's a scam, right? You can't get returns that good. No, nature is set up to get insane returns. When Jesus used the example of getting a return in the Gospels, he said you'll get 30, 60, and 100-fold return, right? Those are called scams today, right? But the reality is it happens every day on every farmer's field. How do I multiply? I have to be willing to risk the thing that took all my effort, put it back in the ground, watch this, and trust that the law of God, the way that the world was set up to operate, will continue to operate in that fashion. So every multiplication of money comes at its root, at its very base, even pre-root, from a trust in the principles and paradigms of God. That the way God set up the world is the way that it will operate because he has decreed it, and his word is trustworthy. His principles are trustworthy. Period. That's how you multiply. Why don't people multiply? They're afraid of loss. Well, what if I put the seed out, Travis, and a tree don't grow? So Jesus tries to be very plain with this. It's so many times throughout the Bible. Watch this. You guys will know it as soon as I start to say it. He that sows much gathers much, but he that sows little gathers little. You want to know how to multiply money? Invest a lot of it. The problem is we don't. This is the funny thing. The very people, Travis, who claim that money is not important to them, hold it like it's their last dollar. They grip it so tight. People are always pointing at rich people like they're the greedy ones. I'm not saying there's not any greedy rich people, but I know a lot more. I led a student movement. I know a lot more kids in the hood who will shoot a man over $20 than rich people who will shoot a man over $20. Why? Scarcity. A belief that there's a limited amount of money in the world. That I must control what small amounts I have access to. We even define stewardship under the model of an idea of holding tightly, okay, to what little we have. And if we hold tightly to what little we have, now we're a good manager. Now we're a good quote unquote steward. But the story ain't about how much you can hold on to tightly. The story is about how much you can multiply.
Yeah.
The man with 5 talents could multiply more than the man with 2 because of his ability. I'm getting into other scriptures. Because of his ability, right? The ability to multiply is a skill and character trait that God celebrates. Why don't people multiply? Same as the story of the talents. I don't think we want to get into all this today. Maybe we do. Same as in the story of the talents. Why did the man who had 1 talent not multiply? Listen to the story that Jesus tells. He says, the man with 1 talent, look it up, says, Lord, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you had not gathered seed. Therefore, I was afraid, and I hid your money in the earth. See, here is what is yours. Fear of loss. Did you know that there's no limit on the money did you know that value is created? There is not a limit to the amount of value that can be created in the world. You, if you believe the principle Travis and I are trying to get you into here today, are a creator, which means anytime you want there to be value, you can create more. I teach my kids money grows on trees. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it does. Do apples not grow on apple trees? Do oranges not grow on orange trees? I have a coconut tree here next to my ornate pool, and coconuts grow on those trees. Can I not trade that coconut for $1? Yes, I can. Why? Because money grows on trees. You can create it. But when you operate in fear of loss, what do? You hold what you have. I was talking to somebody the other day. Okay, I'm just going to keep it real here. I was talking to somebody today. They're like, yeah, I don't want to get that car because it costs too much to fix up. I do all the repairs myself. Okay, if you like working on a car, no, whatever, do your thing. But the idea that you're saving money by working on your car is a violation of the belief that you are a creator made in the image of God. Because if you don't believe you could use your mind to create more value than the $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 that you pay the mechanic to fix your car, if you don't believe you can create more than that with your mind in that time period, you don't understand who you are. You're not saving money. You're losing money.
Can you say that one more time? Like that,
yeah.
I have to get that into the people listening and watching this.
Yes.
That is crazy powerful right there.
Well, I learned this from a guy by the name of Myron Golden. Myron is awesome. I love Myron Golden. And we teach this many times at our events and stuff like that. Have you ever taught them the 4 levels of value?
No, but I am familiar with Myron and the teaching.
Okay. So the 4 levels of value, I like to draw a little staircase that has 4 steps basically, right? And I don't know how many people are going to see this. I'm just drawing 4 steps for those of you who do get to see it. Just imagine 4 steps, right? And on the bottom step, this is what they call levels of value. I'm going to prove it to you with scripture, okay? But the bottom level of value, okay? every all work is valuable. Proverbs clearly teaches that. All work there's in all work there is profit, right? But it's like there are levels of profit and there are levels of work and there are levels of value that you can add. And so have you ever thought about like how do I produce more value? And because if you can produce more value, then you can trade that for anything else valuable. You're like, well, I don't like money. Well, cool. Trade it for the church that your church wants to build. Trade it for that. Okay. If you don't want it, use it for something that makes the world better. Okay. If you want some, you're free to take it too. God gave you the liberty. But okay, here we go. Number one, lowest level of value. I'm going to write it down is implementation. It's valuable. When I was a 17-year-old, I learned how to stick build houses. That's valuable, but it's work. Okay. And it's like there's a cap on the amount of value you can add whenever you are the person doing the work. This is like the be fruitful stage. Out of my own efforts. If I work as a carpenter and I get paid, let's get paid a lot. Let's say I got paid $70, $80 an hour as a carpenter. I don't think they make that much, but let's say they made $80 an hour as a carpenter. Your cap about how much you'd make per year is $160,000. But let's just say there's a cap on implementers. Like you're not from your own personal efforts, very rarely are you going to be able to make more than 200K. And that is the maximum amount of value that you can produce in a year. Does that make sense, Travis? Implementation.
Tracking.
The next, the lie that we believe at implementation stage, when you're operating at that level of value, is that the way that I get more money is to put out more effort. Work harder. That's the lie of that stage.
Work harder, work longer, work more.
How many of you know people who make more money than you and produce more value than you who work less hard than you? Right? Okay, right? Okay, so now the next stage is not implementation, but it's unification. And we see this at every McDonald's you can go to. Who makes more, the worker in the McDonald's or the manager of the worker at the McDonald's, right? The manager. Like people want to get into quote unquote management. Why? Management makes more money. Many of you work in a job are like, oh yeah, I want to be the manager at blah, blah. Why? Because you make more money and you grow more and you have more responsibility and blah, blah, blah. The lie at unification stage is that education makes more money. Do people without college degrees get management positions? In general, no, right? That's kind of the way that the corporate world tests that, right? And so unification is great. You get paid more money primarily because people are crazy. And if you have to manage people, they know they're going to have to pay you more to manage those people. And the cap at the unification is 250, 300K per year. I just saw a report out of Microsoft about what they were paying their executives there. And it was like 250, 300K for their executives with bonuses and stuff like that, maybe 500K. But in general, you know, we call that 500K would be super high, right? McDonald's manager, maybe 100K. That's level 2. Level 3, this is worth it. This is worth the journey, Travis. Level 3 is communication. Communicators make crazy money. Authors, speakers, world-class musicians, right? Actors. These are the communicators of our world, right? And communicators, like there's a cap on them too, but it's closer to like 50, 100 million a year. Like that's where the cap is for really good communicators. And it's like, does that make sense? Like just people who use their mouth and their words and communication to make money. The highest level of value is what we call imagination. Imagination are people who literally create new worlds. They literally imagine new ideas. Elon Musk was like, yeah, electric cars are impossible. I'm going to make it anyways. Oh, there's only one person I could sell a spaceship to, but I imagine a world where I can create a cheaper spaceship so that I could get people to Mars. Think about that insanity, right? Multi-billion-dollar company now, right? What did he do? Where does he work? Imagination. Okay. So imagination, people in imagination make billions. Jeff Bezos. I'm going to make one store that everyone on the internet goes to buy their stuff. Well, what's the internet? Trust me, it's coming. Imagination. Okay? Those are the 4 levels of value. Now watch this. Most people spend most of their life in implementation or unification. All you have to do to produce more value is change the level you're working on. Travis, when I stopped changing my own trash, I started making more money. When I paid a landscaper to do all my landscaping, I started making more money. When I stopped cutting my own grass, I started making more money. Why? Because every minute I spend in implementation, I'm not spending in imagination or communication. And if you just change the focus of the level you're working on, you will add so much more value, and therefore be able to trade that for any other thing of value you'd like to trade for, including cash or buildings for your projects, or cash to pay staff to have bigger movements, or advertising to get the word out about your message. Whatever you want to trade it for, if you're producing value, you can trade it. How do you add more value? Stop working in implementation and unification and start working on communication and imagination. I told you I was going to prove this to you in the Bible. This whole process, weird people, just because it rhymes, would call this the process of manifestation, the entire process, right? I want you to imagine Genesis chapter 1 when God exemplifies to us how he's going to create. Because if we're creators and he wants us to create, does he have a model or framework for creation for us? Yes. Remember how I talked about making this pen or making this microphone? This microphone, this pen, and everything else you see and experience in your life was all made with this process. It started, the Bible says in John chapter 1, referencing the same point in Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God, in the beginning was the Word. Logos in the Greek, which I studied at Villanova University. What's the Logos? The Logos is the thought or plan. We use the word. It's the thought or plan as it existed in the mind of God. The Word of God. God began at imagination, and he thought, what kind of world do I want to create? In the beginning, God had a plan. What did he do? He makes the world, and what happens as soon as he makes the world? The world was without form and void, and there was darkness on the face of the deep. Complete chaos. Some of you are not creating because you want everything to be perfect. Well, I came to tell you that even when God made the world, it wasn't perfect. What did he do to make it good? He stepped into the world that he created and he spoke. Let there be light. What's that? Communication. He went from imagination to communication. And what does he communicate to? Answer? Systems. Light here, darkness here, water here, land here, firmament above, firmament below, stars here. He starts structuring and unifying all things into systems that would work when he wasn't working. Unification. Then after unification, what's he do? He puts a worker in the garden. Day 6, he puts man and he puts workers in the garden to manage that which he's created. When anything that you create will follow the creation process of God in Genesis chapter 1. You will begin by imagining the thing, then you will have to communicate the vision, then you will build systems to make that vision real, and lastly, someone will have to work the system in order to make it happen. That is how creation happens. And many of you have put yourself into the bottom rung of that when you were made to be a creator, and not just at the bottom doing implementing, but at the top doing imagining. Is this helpful?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Okay.
Listen to this again if you guys need to. Make sure you watch it on YouTube so you can see his chart and everything that he's drawing. That's powerful, man. And man, that's what about the people who don't feel like they're creative enough, or man, I'm just a blue collar worker. I don't have a college degree. How could I even start at the top of that thing and come up with stuff?
Yeah, I would stop lying to myself about who I am. What did you just say? I'm just a what?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love you, so I'm going to tell you this. You don't believe what God told you about who you are. Because you just said, I'm just a blue collar worker. When God said, you were made in my image. Mm-hmm. Blue collar work is what you've decided to do. And you may be uniquely gifted at it and really good at it. And you may enjoy it. And that is perfectly okay. But I know lots of quote unquote blue collar workers who would have just as much fun stick building a house as they would be in a boardroom. That's perfectly okay. Who solve problems for that marketplace. Who create inventions for that marketplace. who imagine a way to do the job better and then call a patent attorney to work out that tool and blah 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 blah, or they partner with somebody who's interested in doing those kinds of things and get a piece of the action. Why? Because they believe God told them to produce, and not just produce at what they can produce from their efforts, slaving in their labor from 9 to 5, not just in the struggle of labor, but they also believe they were called to multiply. And multiply means I'm going to reinvest what I've produced as seed to produce even more than I could produce on my own. I'm a multiplier. Somebody say, I'm a multiplier. I'm a multiplier. That's what you're called to do, is multiply. Why? Because when you multiply, it goes to the next step, which is, and I could go so much deeper into all this, but for time's sake, after you've multiplied, what's the next thing he says? Fill the earth. When do you stop multiplying? When you've produced so much from your multiplication and you have an orchard of trees that are producing fruit, you're like, not only do I have enough, I have more than enough. Oh, cool. You're like, so that I can stop, right? And God says, fill the earth. When do you stop producing the value that makes the world better? When the entire earth has experienced the goodness of your creation. That's how you be. Does the whole earth experience the goodness of God's creation? Yes. Are you made to be like him? Yes. Are you a creator? Yes. When should you stop producing? When the whole earth has experienced the goodness that you're producing. Then you can stop. Fill the earth. Somebody's like, well, I don't need that much money. Nobody said you needed that much money. But if what you're producing is good and valuable, shouldn't more people on earth experience it? Isn't that what he's saying to do here? Produce something, multiply it, don't stop multiplying until everyone on earth has experienced the goodness that you receive, that you create. Fill the earth. And if you watch nature, everything in nature tries to exemplify this. You look like the other day, Travis, I got this little courtyard back behind my shower, has a window in it to a courtyard. Luckily, no one can get in there. They'd see me showering, and there's like these kind of Roman-looking cement vases. They're like 3 or 4 feet tall, and they got little plants in it that my landscaper put in there. And one time they had these pink flowers in them, and they're way up there, and like 4 feet tall or something like that. And one day I'm standing in the shower and I'm looking out the window, and I see right in front of the gate that leads out of the courtyard, between 2 cracks in the brickwork. There's a little crack between brickwork, and there's like dirt there. It was a pink flower growing, and it was like 15 feet from the vase. That was like just a little ways. And I go, oh my gosh, some little seedling of a little flower up in the vase caught himself a wind wave, surfed his way down to try and find a place to expand its little pink flower kingdom. Who knows how many seeds had been planted and landed on the bricks where it couldn't produce. But this little seedling landed in the crack between the bricks, found itself some nutrients in the soil right there, and was growing itself up. Why? Because God commanded the earth to multiply. And not just multiply, but fill the earth. I was like, that flower's smarter than me. Because unlike the flowers, which are on automation by God, we were a creature made with will. And we can decide whether to obey God or disobey God. And I'm saying this with love because I believe in you and that you were called to greater things. I'm talking to your audience right now, Travis. You were called to fill the earth, but some of you are living in direct disobedience to God because you're comfortable where you are. And you're not expanding. And he's called you to bigger things, but you're afraid to sail the wind down because what if I land on a brick and nothing happens? Sow more. Because he that sows much gathers much. So this little flower grows, right? And it's just a picture of God's command to the earth to fill it. But watch what happens when you start filling the earth. Some of you aren't filling the earth because of the fear you're facing, while other human beings who do not have good intentions are filling the earth. people with evil messages. I had to fight against these messages in student culture because Beyonce's got some messages for the world and Cardi B's got some messages to the world, and they're not afraid to produce their music, multiply their impact, and fill the earth with their messages. And so while they're filling the earth, they're like that little flower filling the earth. The principles still work for them. And they're making money hand over fist while they're telling the world to live a lifestyle that will destroy them. Watch this. Watch this. What happens, though, when one thing is obeying what God says and trying to fill the earth, and another thing is trying to fill the earth at the same time? At some point, as everything that God makes, including humans, are trying to fill the earth, tell me if I'm making sense, Travis, eventually worlds will collide. Right? Between the creations, worlds will collide. Weeds will hit corn, right? The weeds are trying to expand, the corn is trying to expand, and there is a collision that takes place there. And God, in his infinite wisdom, lets us know, yeah, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. But as you do this, as you fill the earth with messages and value and meaningful things that make the world better, you are going to come in direct conflict with other things that are trying to fill the earth. And sometimes when that collision happens, it will be violent. Anybody ever seen violence in nature when two worlds collide? It's a picture. Picture of what? Picture of things that are trying to fill the earth. When he says, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, the last word that he used there is subdue it. I had to look it up, Travis, because subdue it, it's like, that doesn't sound like a nice, gentle, loving savior. That doesn't sound gentle. What does subdue mean? I was like, that almost sounds militaristic. And so I looked it up in the Hebrew. Guess what? It is. It means to force to bend the knee. I'm an MMA and jiu-jitsu guy. It would literally mean make the other person tap.
Yeah.
Dominate. Dominate. Why? Because there's other forces that are going to try and compete with the goodness that you're creating. And there are messengers and voices in this world right now that are winning, that are wrecking the message of God's kingdom, that are lying about the message of God's kingdom, that are making seem foolish the message of God's kingdom. Why? Because the people of God's kingdom are not fighting back. We're busy satisfied at our fruitful stage. We're happy to circle the wagons, Travis, and we'll just have our own Christian concert and have fun. Well, congratulations, but circling the wagons never won a war. And in most cases, the people who circled the wagons died. God said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and dominate. Win. Somebody said, Joe, why are you working to make money and add value to the world like you have enough? Because I've got a battle I'm fighting. Cardi B is destroying kids' lives. Messages that are destructive to families and people and real lives and real humans are winning the war of attention in our world. And if I believe that I'm called by God to march the kingdom forward, this is my mission, and this is how I win the mission. That's why our company name is Multiply Inc. That's why our mission is to multiply movements that matter. Because there are movements that are in the hearts of your people that no one has even heard about yet, Travis, that they're fearful to create, that they don't feel the liberty to create. They're waiting for a voice from heaven. They're waiting to feel good about it. They're waiting for it to feel comfortable. Well, can I tell you, it won't be comfortable. And it won't be pretty. And it won't be all organized and neat, because even the world God made was without form, darkness, and void. God had to step into the chaos of the moment in order to create the world that he desired. And I'm talking to some kingdom-believing people on this show to let you know God is calling you to create. God is calling you to step up to your full potential as the creator he made you to be. And it's not going to happen by being a little wallflower. Step into the chaos. Embrace the chaos. Embrace your calling. He's already told you what you need to do. Create something of value. Multiply that thing. Risk your capital and go all in. Don't stop until the whole world is experiencing your goodness, and recognize that throughout the entire thing, there's going to be a battle. And there's one word that'll tell you what to do when you face the battle of expansion that he's calling you to. There's one word: dominate. Win. Because you're on the winning side. And that's your calling.
Come on. Can everybody just stand to their feet real quick and just give Joe a standing ovation? The stuff you said here today is so important, so vital for the body of Christ, for everybody listening to this. I'm 100% with Joseph. His company's called Multiply. Mine's called Increase. We're a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
And we're preaching the same thing. He's bringing a different perspective to it. And I know for a lot of you guys listening to this is resonating with you. Please don't let this be something that just makes you feel good and then you go about your day. Oh, that was cool what he said. No. You need to listen to this again, and probably again after that. And you probably need to pull out your pen, and you probably need to pull out your paper, and you probably need to pause, and you probably need to pray, and you need to think on some stuff, and you need to write some stuff out, and you need to realize that these 4 steps are for everybody, not just Joseph, not just certain people. It's literally for everybody who's listening to this. If you're in Christ and you want to do something that matters, you need to listen to these 4 steps. And you need to figure out, actually, first thing you need to do is make the decision that you're going to do these 4 steps. And just you making the decision, things are going to start to turn for you. Things are going to start to fall into place for you. Because, and then realize, he didn't say this directly, but every single of the 4 steps that stops people is a fear.
Oh, so good.
And we know that fear is the devil's playground. That's his atmosphere. If you've got a fearful atmosphere in your home, in your heart, in your mind, that's where he can work. That's what cracks the door open to him getting in there, getting into your life. And you know what? I'll be honest with you guys. Most of you, he's not going to be able to talk out. Like, he can't talk you out of Christianity. Most people listening to this, he's not going to be able to get you to a spot where you're like, you know what? I don't believe in God anymore. But what he will do is get you to stay where you're at. What he will do is get you to compromise, to get you to settle, to not go on your movement, to not go on your mission, to not do the thing that God has called you to do the thing that's in your heart. He's going to get you to just be stagnant, satisfied, comfortable, settled. And next thing you know, you go up to see Jesus and he says, "What'd you do with my stuff?" And you said, "Well, I paid my bills and I survived." And you're not going to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." You'll hear, "All right, I guess get in here." The goal of this, guys, is to do something, is to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The goal of this, there's really nothing more that matters than your mission. And this year has just been super strong in that for me, especially as I've gone all in on teaching and preaching here at the Increase Method. This is all I do now, because I am seeing more and more clearly the power of purpose. That's why I had to have Joseph on here. I love his message. I love his mission. I love the movements behind everything that he does. And please, guys, I'm basically like pleading with you to listen to this again. Listen to what he's saying. Take action on this. Remove fear out of your life. Dive into faith. Dive into the word. See yourself the way God sees you. Anytime you have these thoughts of like, who am I? How could I do that? I don't have this. I don't have a college degree. I don't have money. I don't have the. Stop. Go back to Genesis. Read it out loud. I was made in the likeness and image of God. And God is a creator. That means I'm like him. Let's be super simple. In his likeness means you are like him. You create. The scripture I gave you in Job, you decide. You decree a thing. Another translation says, you choose what to do, and it'll be established for you. And you got to remember this, guys. God's in you. You're in him. You abide in him. His words abide in you. Don't be afraid to pick something. You guys are we're unified with God. The whole same spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives in you. It's in you. Go pick the thing that's in your heart and let's go be fruitful and let's go multiply. And let's go dominate. Let's go crush this thing. I'm excited. I'm fired up. Joseph, is there anything else you could give these people who are like, hey, what's my next step? Let's give them like one action step to start with today.
Yeah, I love your action step of really listen to this. Number one, like it's decades of failure that birthed this revelation that shouldn't be a revelation at all to the church. It should be like foundational, and in a lot of ways it is. Like the foundation of working hard, right, is a very Christian ordeal. Like laziness is not celebrated in Christianity because slothfulness is one of the 7 deadly sins, right? But I don't know if this is a good place to share this or not, but I wrote a book called Made for This, which is really looking at no one really talks about for the modern world, the intersection between God, money, and mission, and how God made the world for all three to work together, right? To account, God made the world so that money and mission would be a part of it, right? And so, so it's really an exploration of that. A lot of scriptural, looking at some of my story and failures, and how that now, like, because we've acquired the skill and ability to multiply, I can help any movement multiply because the principles are the same. It doesn't matter. And this is a skill. Man, there's so much I want to say, Travis. Can I just say it this way? God wants you to be good at multiplying. God curses things that don't multiply. God rewards things that do multiply, period. Fig tree doesn't produce fruit. What's he do? Curses it. It dies. Guy with 1 talent who was afraid because he didn't want to lose God's money. Fear of loss. What does God do? Do you ever listen to what God said to the guy who had 1 talent and saved it? The message of money in the church today is save as much as you can.
Yeah.
The message of Jesus in the parable of the talents was one guy saves the money, gives it back to him so he doesn't lose it. And Jesus says, you wicked and slothful servant. Says a couple other things. And then he says, he sends them into a place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, which every theologian will tell you is a picture of hell. He puts the fearful, non-multiplying one in hell. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm not, take with that what you will. I'm just saying that's what Jesus said. I don't know what to make of it. You're like, oh, but Joe, by grace, I'm saved through faith. Well, praise the Lord. But clearly he wants you to multiply, right? So how can you multiply? I'd love to give everyone a copy of my book as it's coming out, called Made for This. That's cool. Is that something that I can share with them?
That'd be phenomenal. I want a copy.
I've got a website. You can go to changetheworldlive.com, changetheworldlive.com. I'm giving a free copy to everyone who comes. We're doing master classes to teach more people who are looking for mission. They're looking to multiply their mission. I'm working together with influencers and leaders now, and really assembling a power team of influencers to start fighting back culturally for the message that we believe in, to stop just circling the wagons and literally like advance the kingdom forward. And for people who want to like tag into those principles and learn the principles to really multiply movements, money is going to be a part of that. So if you don't want to talk about money, you don't like the scriptures and you don't like the way God set up the world, but it's time for you to stop arguing with the way God set up the world and just start operating according to the way that he set up the world.
This is the increased nation you're preaching to right now. So they're like, we're down. You're
down. Okay. So yeah, if you want to talk about God, money, and mission, read a book on it. Come to some exciting events and hear from me and other influencers like Travis. Travis, I'd love to have you sometime, and that would be great to have you there.
Tell me when. I'm down. Yeah. I'm ride or die with you, man. Like we're homies for life, whether you know it or not.
Sure. So changetheworldlive.com. That I'll make that your next step, call to action, like any good marketer would. But I think you'll really enjoy what you find there. So
dude, yeah, I'm making it mandatory. I'll put a link below, of course, but it's mandatory if you're listening to this and you believe in what I teach and preach, which is what God teaches and preaches. Then you're going to click the link below and you go check out what Joseph has for you. I'm serious.
No
we
coercion, none.
no, we've got to, like, when you say circle the wagons, what I think of is we got to stop playing defense, y'all.
Yeah.
We got to go on the offense. Circling wagons is, most of you guys listening. I don't want to say most of y'all. That's not true. Uh, a lot of us play not to lose instead of playing to win. When in First Corinthians, God called us to run our race to win.
Yeah.
Run your race as one who wins. A lot of you are playing, you're running your race to be right in the middle. Or just maybe I'll finish it. No, you need to run as one who wins. So we need to be aggressive with this stuff. We need to be going on the offense because we do got a mission and we got a movement and we need to multiply it.
Amen. I believe it.
Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Nice hanging out with Increase Nation. You all rock. Can't wait to meet some of you and hang out more with Travis and the whole crew here. So
I love you, buddy. I appreciate you. You guys go check out Joseph. Follow him on all the social media stuff too. Are you on YouTube?
yeah, you can. I'll have all the links on changetheworldlive.com.
Okay, perfect. I just want you guys to follow him. He's got great stuff. Let's support him. And for some of you listening, you'll be a great fit. Head over and get his book, watch his master classes, and some of you guys need to be teaming up with Joseph and what he's doing over there at Multiply Inc. I love you, buddy. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
See you.